Good afternoon, everyone. Today's project is going to be an illuminated storage box. You might call this a keepsake box, could be a jewelry box, or store whatever you like. The main thing is, and the main difference is, it's going to be illuminated with RGB LEDs. A little bit more complex than just illumination, but we'll get into that in a second. So first, you can see the laser cut pieces in front of us here, which does not exactly resemble a box yet, but it will soon. Now to illuminate this, we will be using the Zifnu WS2812b Breakout boards with the lens, as you can see here. So when you break these guys out of the holder there, they come in a panel of 8. You get the small board itself with the lens, with mounting holes on either side of the lens and connection points outside of that. And I'll show you in just a bit how these will be used in the project. First, to drive these, we will need a driver circuit. We'll need 5 volts. So, threw together a simple controller board here, which the files for the box itself and for the breakout board, as well as the firmware for this, will be available for download as part of this project. Now on the breakout board here, this is actually 3 boards altogether. The main board has the microcontroller, has the boost converter circuit to raise the voltage from the lithium ion cell, which is 3.7 volts nominal, up to 5 volts, and a charger for the lithium ion as well via USB port. Down in the bottom corner here, we have a breakout for a reed switch. We'll be using that to detect when the box is open and closed. Switches will be used to control the color. So you can choose between red, blue, green and set the level of each one for reproduction of up to 16 million different colors, which is way more than we need for this project. We'll probably simplify it a bit. Alright, so first things first, we're going to assemble the box. I'll fast forward through the boring parts here. You can pause it if you need to figure out how something's going together. I need to remove the 3 small wood pieces here. These will actually be the buttons after we mount the board to the bottom and put these in place. Left them in place for the finishing of the wood, which on this one it was just lightly sanded, and then a couple of coats of wipe-on poly. Give it a nice sheen, take care of the slivers, or the potential slivers of the loose strands. You can use whatever finish you like or even paint it. And of course, there's no need to make this out of bamboo. You can use a material of your choice. So this is the bottom. In the back of the box, with a placement for the USB for charging, switches in the front, and we're using these little hinges, which open to 90 degrees and have a stop to ensure it doesn't go over. And as you can see, these mount right in the corners. Alright, so the pieces for the base are these guys and the bottom piece. So let's get this assembled. One other thing. So if you notice, there's actually places for the M3 nuts on the back have been etched. So if you notice the wider board here, the wider board is actually for the controller. The small one up front is for the switches. So, with that in mind, this one goes into the back, this one in the front, and of course the laser etched nuts should be not visible when you assemble this piece. So you simply want to flip that around. That'll mount in there like that. And that'll form the inside of the box. And of course you can also cover that with felt or other material if you like. Alright. To hold things in place while they dry, we'll be using just standard painter's tape. And for this, just using a bit of Elmer's, you can use super glue or whatever you'd like. Easiest to apply this with a toothpick. So if you use a dampened paper towel, you can just use that to wipe off the excess glue. And dry it gently. Simply tape it in place. First piece is always the most difficult. The more you get onto this structure, the stronger it becomes. Alright, so this one is going to be the back panel. With that in mind, the front right hand side panel, you want to have the two mounting points here. If we can see, there we go. This will be for the reed switch. Be sure to get the glue out of the corners. Easiest way to do that, use a Q-tip that's just moistened. This part will be visible from the inside, so definitely want to make sure there's no excess glue. Alright. Now, once again, make sure we have the back of the box identified by the wider mounting points. Face that back. Top piece here will mount down directly onto that, as such. There is the inside of the base of our box. Going to set this aside to dry and work on the insert that goes into the top. And this one does not have any markings on the interior, so we can actually just assemble this however we choose. And I'm going to do this the same way as before. So I'm going to show you a trick here. You assemble these pieces like that. Should have done this for the base as well. And just add a small piece of tape to the corners so this will hold everything square while you put the other pieces on. Just going to temporarily tape the corners. Keeps it nice and square while you actually install the remaining piece, and then you start taking pieces off and gluing them and putting them back on as you go around the edges. Alright, so we've completed the two interior pieces of our box. This will go inside the lid, this will go inside the base. What I'm going to do at this point is set it aside with something heavy on top, probably a book, to let that set up while we start working on the exterior pieces. It's time to assemble the top and bottom of our enclosure. You'll notice the pieces are pretty much identical except for the depth. This is the base, this is the lid. And the back piece on both the lid and the base have cutouts in the back, and that is for the hinge. That'll be more apparent once we actually start assembling things. For now, we just need to assemble the individual pieces. So much like before, we're going to go ahead and tape these in the corners just to hold it together while we attach the final remaining piece. Okay, we now have our two pieces assembled, the lid and the base. Give you an idea of the size here. So next we need to let these dry for an hour before moving on to the next step. So I'm going to pause the video here and we'll be back shortly. The individual pieces have all dried for a couple hours, so we're set to move on to the next step. And actually I've already jumped ahead a little bit by test fitting the hinges in place on the two interior pieces. They're already pre-drilled, so it's just a matter of putting them into place and screwing the screws in. I went ahead and clipped the screws off as well, just because the ones I had were just a little bit too long. As you can see, it fits together nice and neat. So the next step is to actually take the M3 nylon nuts, just like this guy here, and to glue them into place. And for every spot where there's a nice etching, they'll be glued in. Gonna hold off on the ones for the buttons at this point. Those I might adjust a little bit when I put them in, so we'll just make sure that the board fits perfectly before we glue these guys down. The rest are all preset. Alright, so we have all of the M3 nylon nuts attached to the box. ready to move on to attaching the individual boards. So if you remember earlier, I showed you a little small breakout board, which is technically 3 boards: the main controller, the switches, and the reed switch. And these just break off after you assemble it. So in the end, you will end up with a small controller board with the USB charging port, the charging IC, microcontroller, and the boost converter, which will raise the voltage to 5 volts to drive the WS2812b LEDs on the Zifnu LED lens breakout boards. Reed switch, and the individual 3 switches. So all we're going to do is take it like this. And the boards are designed to be mounted component side down, so you simply flip it over. This is our connection point for the lithium ion cell, and this is the programming header. So we simply just slide that into place, line it up with the nuts underneath, take our small M3 screws, and attach that down. If you do them too tight and break one loose, you can just pull the board back off and reattach it. And then we're just going to work our way around attaching the individual LED with the lens. As such. And we'll complete this and be right back. As you can see, have all the boards attached. Cables managed a bit, just a few spots of hot glue to hold them into place, keep everything nice and compact. The only board remaining is the switch board. And if you notice the lenses and everything are all nice in place. So if you remember, we cut out the little oblong pieces there in the beginning. I've actually super glued a small piece to the bottom that's just a little bit larger. And these are going to keep it from slipping out through the bottom or through the top once we get the switchboard in. And it'll align just like that. The switchboard, I decided to mount board side down. So I won't be using the nuts, I'll just hot glue it into place. And in the end, they'll sit there nice and flush, and just a small press to depress it will actuate it. So I'm going to go ahead and attach the new switchboard here and the little buttons. Be right back. And here we have the completed internals for our illuminated box. Switches are mounted. Matches a nice wood grain and everything else since we removed them from the piece there originally. Alright, so with everything in place, I also went ahead and attached the magnet, which will activate the reed switch. We're ready for a test. Now the battery I'll be using is a 1500 milliamp hour, and that'll be mounted on this side. I still need to extend the leads over to the back. Wasn't enough room in the depth for a connector, so it's going to solder it on directly. For now, we'll just use a stand-in battery. Open this up. So the firmware is pretty simple at this point. The first button actually selects the color, the red, blue, or green. The second button is lower, next button is higher. So you simply select the color, which will flash that color, in this case red. And you can actually adjust the level up or down from there. Let me turn the light off here so we can see that just a little bit better. Looks better in person. Obviously the camera is blurring it a little bit. Let's add some blue to that. And finally some green, which of course gives us white. And if we want a little bit warmer white, we could actually just go around to blue and just reduce the blue a little bit. It's a little bit warmer. There we go. So now, remember the reed switch is over here. Take a small magnet, put it on there, it turns it off. Take it off, turns it back on. Actually goes into sleep, so it's a very low current draw. And of course that happens when the lid closes. It'll shut off. So we're ready to assemble the battery into the unit here and actually assemble it into the box. Alright, so we have the battery attached. Okay, have the battery attached, hooked up, everything's ready to go. Just some double-sided tape holding the battery in place in case I need to remove it later, replace it, or anything else. Just want to make changes. Rather than hot gluing the wires down for the battery, just put a piece of tape over everything, keep it nice and compact while it gets inserted into the base. And if you notice, it turns off as the magnet gets close enough to the reed switch to activate it. So next is to insert this into the base and then add the lid. So just do a test fit first of all. Make sure none of the wires are being pinched. Might have to trim a little bit of the hot glue. Nope, they fit. It is designed to be snug, so just got to be careful as we put it in place. And just test that this is still working correctly. Which it is. Alright. Good. And I'll actually remove these and actually hot glue them in place, just a couple dabs of hot glue, in case I need to take it apart later. Everything fits nicely there. I'm going to go ahead and attach everything, and I'll be right back. And here we have the completed box. Went ahead and mounted the insert into the lid and the insert into the base. The top one is glued in place. The bottom one is actually press fit. I determined it was tight enough that it didn't need to be glued into place, which makes it easier to pull back out to make adjustments. Also went ahead and added a bit of detail to the box in the feet, as you can see here, and in the latch. Here's the interior, and as you can see, the light turns on as we open it, right to about that point. That's the magnetic switch on this side, the reed switch down here, and the magnet in the top. USB ports in the back for charging. 3 buttons in the front, kind of flush, you can see here, for changing the color. Once again, you just hit it until the color is displayed that you want to modify. In this case, where you are reducing the green. There's the red. Much better in person. The camera is washing out the colors a little bit, but it's quite brilliant in person. And of course, you don't have to go solid colors. You could add a multitude of colors or even just cycle through the colors, which holding this down kind of does that for you, if you like the disco effect. So there we have today's project. It is the illuminated box using the Zifnu WS2812 LED Breakout with the lens and the control board. The files for this project will be available for download as well as the firmware. Hope you enjoyed this build and hope this inspires you to build one of your own. Thanks for watching.